In this video, we're going to talk about segments, lengths, and circles. So if you notice, there's 3 different pictures on your circle that you want to copy onto your green circle that you've got in front of you. And the first one is if we have 2 chords going through our circle and they intersect, then we're going to take the piece times the piece, and then it's equal to the piece times the piece. So that's what we're going to be seeing over and over and over again. That one's probably the most common one you're going to see, so you might want to put a big star by that question. All right, so the next one is if we have a secant and a tangent. So both of these are very similar to each other. So what you want to think of is you're taking the outside times the whole thing, and then the outside times the whole thing. So it just happens that our tangent is outside, and it's also the whole thing. So that's what ends up being squared. So the same idea works here. We can take our outside times the whole thing, outside times the whole thing, and then those are equal to each other. So really both of these, I'm going to be writing them the same way as the outside times the whole. So for this first one, remember this is 2 chords. So this is our piece times piece equals our piece times piece. So when we fill this in, we have our x times our 3, and then the other 2 pieces are the 4 and the 6. So when we simplify this, we get 3x equals 24. When we divide both sides by 3, we get x equals 8. And that's all we have to do for number 1. For number 2, it's the same setup, so we're taking piece times piece. So these are my 2 pieces of the first segment. So x times x plus 4. And then the other 2 pieces would be my x plus 2 and my x plus 1. So I need to write those out like so. So if you notice on this left side, we have to distribute. And on this side, we need to FOIL. So distribute, so x times x. And then I'm going to have my 4 times my x, so I get x squared plus 4x. On this right-hand side, I have x times x. So we get x squared. X times 1. So I get a plus 1x. Then I have my 2 times x. So I get 2x. And then 2 times 1. And I get a 2. So then I need to combine my like terms together. So I get x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals my x squared plus 4x. And just like we've seen before, I have x squared on both sides. So when I subtract x squared, those cancel. So I just have 4x equals 3x plus 2. So when I subtract my 3x over, I get x equals 2. So when I plug those back in, I need to plug it back in here. So for my mn is going to be 4. For my nl is going to be 3. So if I want ml, so that whole distance, I have to add them together, so I get a 7. All right, so my kn is just going to be a 2. My nl, since 2 plus 4 is 6, I get 6. So jk, the distance of jk is my 2 plus 6, so I end up getting my 8 when I add those together. For this one, remember it's not inside the circle, there's pieces outside. So I need to take my outside times the whole, and then do the same thing for the other side of my equation. So my outside times the whole. So if I'm looking at this top segment up here, my outside is my 6, and the whole thing is 15 when I add those together. So I have 6 times 15. On this bottom piece down here, my outside is the 5, but then the whole distance is x plus 5. So I have outside is my 5, the whole thing is my x plus 5, and then I just need to simplify this. So I get 90 on the left. When I distribute, I get 5x plus 25, and then subtract my 25. So I get 5x equals 65. To get rid of my 5, I need to divide by 5. So I get x equals 13. And on this one, I just have to solve for x, so that's it. On these 2 questions, we still have a piece that's outside. So remember, we want to do the outside times the whole, and then outside times the whole again. So even though there's a piece that is only outside, it will still work. So on the top piece, the outside piece is my 1. The whole thing is 4. So I have 1 times 4. The outside in this one is my x, and it's also the whole thing, so I just multiply it by another piece. So now I have 4 equals x squared. So to undo this, I need to take the square root on both sides to cancel out that squared. So I get x equals plus and minus 2. So that means I have x equals positive 2 and negative 2. But if you look over here, I cannot have the negative 2 because I can't have a negative for the length of a side. All right, so for number 5, I'm going to start a new page for this one just because it takes a little bit more space. So again, I'm still starting with the outside times the whole. And then I also have my outside times the whole. So outside again of this top one is my x. And then the whole thing would be x plus 10. All right, so for the other one, I have my 12 is the outside piece, and again, the whole thing is 12. So when I simplify this and I distribute, I get x squared plus 10x equals 144. So because it is a quadratic, I need to make it y equals 0 on one side, so I need to subtract my 144 over. So I get x squared plus 10x minus 144 because it's not like terms with anything. So one thing you have to remember from Algebra 1 is that there's 3 different ways to solve quadratics. So the first one is we can factor and solve it if that's possible. We could also graph it to in y equals and then find where it crosses the x-axis, so find my x-intercepts. Or I could use the quadratic formula, which that's always the last choice usually just because it's so tedious and it takes a lot of steps. So I'm going to do it the first 2 ways. So in orange, if we want to factor and solve this, we have to look at the 144. And I need to make a list of all of my different pairs that multiply to give me 144. So that would be 1 and 44, 2 and 72, 3 and 48. 4 times 36 will also give us that. 6 times 24. 8 times 18, 9 times 16, and then lastly is 12 times 12. So I want to find the pair that's going to give me this 10 when I add them together. I realize it needs to multiply to give me a negative 44, and because this middle sign is positive, my bigger number in these pairs are going to be matching that. So those are the positives. That means if it needs to equal this negative when I multiply it, the other number needs to be negative, because a negative times a positive gives me a negative. So the only pair that gives me a positive 10 when I add them together is these two right here. So that means when I set up my 2 factors that I'm using my minus 8 and I'm using my positive 18. So those are my factors. So when I set them equal to 0 to solve, I'm going to add my 8 over. So I get x equals 8. For this one, when I have x plus 18, sorry about that, equals 0, then I could subtract my 18 from both sides. So I end up with x equals negative 18. So just like we saw in the other one, because the x is just the length of a side, I cannot have a negative length, so my x would equal 8. Now if I wanted to graph it, I would type this into y equals. So y equals x squared plus 10x minus 144. When I graph it and I adjust the window, this is what my graph is going to look like. So it crosses over here at x equals negative 18, and it crosses right there at x equals 8. And just like before, I don't want the negative 1, so I'm going to end up with my x equals positive 8 for my final answer for x.